What's up, guys? My name is Zach, and today I am driving a 1991 Infiniti M30 Coupe. Up front is a 3.0 liter V6, and down below is a 4-speed automatic transmission. Now, I am super excited to be driving this M30 for two reasons. First of all, I've never driven one before, and I do really love the VG30. But the second reason is that this is one of Infiniti's first vehicles. Infiniti came to the US in the late 1980s, and they offered two vehicles, this, the M30, and the Q45. So this is a very interesting piece of Infiniti's history that I'm excited to share with you today. But if you would like to share your little piece of history with me, you can head on over to my website, zackpradel.com/submit. It's a quick and easy submission form, takes under a minute to fill out, and I come out to you. But let's get back to that VG30 under the hood. Well, if you're wondering where you've heard that name before, this was also the engine used in the Nissan Z cars throughout the 80s and into the 90s. This makes 162 horsepower, but what's really nice is the torque. It has a rather luxurious amount of torque, which is really nice to see, especially for a luxury coupe, which we'll get onto a little bit later on. Sounds like a Z, but it's not fast. It's not really a quick car, but it does have that torque, which is why a lot of people end up using this for drifting. Like I said, paired to it is a 4-speed automatic. This was the only way that the Infiniti M30 ever came. A lot of people will manual swap them, either with a Nissan Z transmission, with a Maxima flywheel, or some other swap. But from the factory, they only came with the 4-speed auto. Last but not least about the drivetrain, the M30 is rear-wheel drive. So how does it feel to actually drive the M30? Well, it is comfortable. It's a rear-wheel drive, torquey little coupe, but I think the 4-speed auto really holds it back. It's quite sluggish on the shifts, and right now, for some reason, it doesn't want to stay in overdrive. It keeps kicking me out for random reasons. But visibility is good because really this is an 80s car. With that stuff out of the way, let's talk about the interior. Well, in front of me, I have 4 gauges. Off to the left is my coolant temperature. Then I have my tachometer and speedometer in the center, and my fuel off to the far right. The steering wheel actually is the most modern feeling part of the interior because it actually does get an airbag, which is really nice for 91. And I do have cruise control off to the right. Off to the left, I do have some warning lights, my security light, rear defrost, and then I have my gauge dimmer switches, which just say bright or dark. Kind of weird. Normally it's like a scroll wheel in most cars. I also get a climate control vent over there, trunk release, and fuel door release. And then moving on to the door, we do have a funky looking locking mechanism, power locks, and power windows. Moving into the center, we get more warning lights, funny enough. And off to the right, we get a digital clock, 2 climate control vents, then a stack of vertical buttons. So I have radio on, scan, AM and FM, and volume up and down. Really, really weird positioning. Then I have the climate controls, so I do have auto climate as well as econ climate, fan speed, all of those goodies, and I get a little electronic readout, which was definitely nice for 91. Then I have my cigarette lighter and a little cubby, and then we have an aftermarket radio. However, the owner threw in the original radio in the trunk because it actually did get a Bose radio from the factory. Very, very nice. Then we do have our openable ashtray and the shifter. The shifter looks like anything out of any other Nissan product from the era. Not really that interesting. And then we have a little cubby. I guess this could be construed as a cup holder. So we'll do a big friggin' bottle test in the 91 Infiniti M30. And unfortunately it fails. I could have told you weeks before this review that it was going to fail, but alas, we still have to test it. Then we have our suspension settings. So this car currently is outfitted with S13 suspension from the Nissan 240SX. There's some slight modification that goes into it, but it's from a 240. This car was originally outfitted from Infiniti with Sonar suspension. It was supposed to read the road and then adjust itself accordingly. It also had this button right here to adjust between comfort and sport settings. However, these systems oftentimes failed, and because this car didn't sell well in the US to begin with, and also just over time, they just got rarer and rarer, it's extremely hard to find the original suspension. So most people swap over to the S13 suspension because it's so readily available, and that's the case with this car. Then we do have a center console with nothing in it, and then we gotta talk about the seats. The seats are very comfortable. This is a luxury coupe. That's what Infiniti was going for at the time, and so the seats reflect that, and I am pleasantly enjoying them. However, speaking of seats, we do have back seats, so let's go do a back seat review. All right, so I'm in the back of the Infiniti M30. It's not going to be a comfortable back seat. The physical back seat itself is actually very comfortable. The material it's made out of, cushy, light, nice. I love it. I also do have this little center console right here, but if the seat is actually moved back to the position it's supposed to be in, or a comfortable position that the driver would be in, it's not going to leave a whole lot of leg room, which is going to be not good. Not good. It's a coupe. It's a luxury coupe. You know, it has back seats to have them, but, you know, they don't really expect you to use them all that much. Let's hop out. We'll take a quick look at the trunk and cargo space, and then we'll talk about the looks. All right, around the back of the Infiniti M30, like a lot of cars in this era, the trunk is hidden behind the badge. Then pull up, and here you are in the trunk. So, tons of space back here. It's what I love about 90s cars. Did they have a whole lot of crumple zone? Not really, but you do get tons of space here in the trunk of the M30. Really, really love that. That's the radio that I mentioned earlier. That's the factory radio, but overall, nothing really to write home about with the trunk, but still very, very cool. Now we gotta talk about the looks, and I'm kind of torn on the look of the M30. It really reminds me of the Lexus ES from the same generation and year. It's sort of 80s, but also has 90s hints. But in all reality, this chassis was very dated by the time Nissan decided to even bring this to the US in '89. This chassis dates back to the mid-80s and really early 80s from a design standpoint. And so when it hit American shores, it already felt kind of old. And I think that was one of its biggest downfalls. But before we get dragged away with that, let's get on to my final thoughts. What do I think driving an Infiniti M30 from 1991? Well, I've enjoyed my experience here. I think it is a decently cushy, comfortable cruiser. I wouldn't mind having one of these. I've enjoyed my time with it. But since the final thought segment is sort of a free-form conversation that I like to have, might go in any direction, I want to talk about the history of Infiniti when it comes to this car. So, Infiniti was formed and started selling cars in 1989 in the United States exclusively. At the same time, you'll also see that Lexus was formed and started selling cars, and Acura was formed and started selling cars. So why was it that three luxury brands from Japan cropped up at the exact same time in the American market? Well, it can be dated back, of course, to the oil crisis of the 1970s. Back in the early 70s, there was a global oil crisis. War and political strife made oil very, very hard to get a hold of, and so prices went up, and people around the world, but especially Americans, started demanding more economical cars. This took several years for the big American auto manufacturers to adjust to. But there was a little island that was already making very efficient vehicles: Japan. And so Japanese cars became more and more popular in the United States as the oil crisis went on. They became so popular that they were more reliable, more efficient, and just better cars than what we were selling here domestically. So a lot of people started switching over to Japanese automobiles. We saw this in the late 70s and early 80s. Well, the Reagan administration in the 1980s didn't like that people were buying more Japanese cars than American cars. So they imposed a self-inflicted import law that only allowed a certain amount of Japanese cars into the country to help stimulate American sales. This meant that Japanese companies could import whatever cars they wanted. They just had a select number. And so to not lose money, Japanese manufacturers started sending the more expensive cars that they were going to profit off more. But Americans weren't used to paying a lot of money for Japanese cars. They were cheap, affordable, economical vehicles like Toyota Corollas and Mazda 323s. So Honda, Toyota, and Nissan started a new brand of luxury vehicles for the American market in order to not lose profit from the new import law. So that's why we see Acura, Lexus, and Infiniti all formed at the same time. It was just to make more money in the American market when they were limited on their sales. Now, as time went on and other administrations came into office, this rule was basically ended. A lot of Japanese started manufacturing here. Now we have like the Camry built here, the Tundra's built here, the Accord and Pilot are built here. So it's not really a thing anymore, but that's why they started the Infiniti brand. And this was really just a rebadged Nissan Leopard that was already being sold in Japan for quite some time. All they did was really switch the dashboard to not only make it left-hand drive, but they didn't give it all the digital goodies that the Leopard got. This is basically a mirrored R31 dashboard fitted for the US. So when this car came to the States, it didn't sell well. There's a couple of reasons why that might be. One of my reasons, I think, is because Infiniti is just a weird sounding brand. It's a brand new brand that no one really knows about. I know it's still Nissan, and we had Nissan here for a while and Datsun before that, but still, any new brand takes time to get used to. The other reason is that there wasn't a huge market for luxury coupes at the time, at least Japanese ones, and there weren't really any options here on the M30. You could pick your interior and exterior color. You could get a little bit of wood trim on the dash if you wanted, but all of them came with the bows, all of them came with the adjustable suspension, all of them came with sunroofs, or you could get the convertibles, which were a little bit more popular. So this car failed and didn't see a second generation. Although the Q45 did, which was a rebadged Nissan President, and the Q is technically still made today with the Q50. But this is one of the first cars that Infiniti made. And although it was a little bit of a rocky start, Infiniti's still around today. They might not be as popular, and I might not enjoy them as much as I'm enjoying this, but hey, at least they've stood the test of time. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Huge thank you to RJ for letting me take out his M30. He's looking to sell this vehicle soon, and so I wanted to hop on it because I think this car is just such a unique piece of history. RJ's been absolutely awesome. I've reviewed his cars over the last, almost 4 or 5 years. He's been such a great asset to the channel, and I can't thank him enough. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to rate the video, comment on the video, and subscribe if you really liked it. Take care, guys.